I'm Richard Gearhart.
And I'm Elizabeth Gearhart.
Welcome to Passage to Profit, the show that's all about entrepreneurism, innovation, and the intellectual property that helps them flourish. Tonight, we have a super special guest, Warren Eckstein, who is a pet psychologist, a celebrity pet trainer, and host of the radio show, The Pet Show. And then after that, we'll also have Colleen Ferry, who is going to be talking about Small Business USA. She is going to be interviewed by our very own award-winning Carrie Barrett, who is from Carrie Barrett Consulting.
And then we are going to have the solution. Throw out your glue. This is a new product. You will never use glue again.
All that glue that I've got, I have to get rid of now.
Robert Harbour will be talking about Bondic. And then last but certainly not least, especially with the holidays coming up, Jen Du has a solution to your hangover woes. So stay tuned.
So stick with it. Anyway, so we're here with Warren Eckstein. It's so happy to have you here with us, Warren. You're a legend in broadcasting, and so we really just want to get right into it. How did you get into the pet counseling business in the first place?
Well, I grew up on Long Island, in a typical Long Island Jewish household. You know, all of my relatives lived in the Bronx and Brooklyn, Staten Island, in the city. We were the first family to move to Long Island. So on weekends, it was like the ultimate gathering. Every one of the cousins, relatives would come to the house on Long Island. I was shy as a kid, believe that. I was shy as a kid. And behind my parents' house was an old little creek, and there were like snapping turtles and ducks and different types of muskrats and rats and geese. And when all these people came towering down on my little home, I said, that's it. I can't deal with it anymore. I love you, Grandma. I love you, Grandpa, but I'm out of here. I went into the backyard, and that's where I spent my time. And ever since I was maybe 8, 9 years old, I always felt more comfortable around animals than I did around people, even to this day. You know, I'm talking to you now and I don't look like I'm afraid, but I got butterflies in my stomach talking to people. When I'm with dogs and cats, piece of cake.
So your first patient was a muskrat?
Yeah, muskrat or a snapping turtle. The snapping turtle had a bit of an attitude adjustment that I had to work on, but we got there.
I was going to say, do they have attitudes? Are they snapping turtles because that's the way they communicate?
If you call something a snapping turtle, chances are they're going to snap. If they just called it a turtle, probably they'd be a lot more mellow. But here's how it started with all these people coming out, and then years later, I got out of the service and I was training in Europe. I actually snuck into East Germany when the wall was up. I can't get in trouble anymore, but because I did that, I was able to work with some of the kennels over there. And then I went to Holland and all over Europe training and whatever. And I came back to the US and I had just gotten married to my high school sweetheart, and nothing existed. There was no such thing as animal psychology. I told my parents I was going to be America's first animal psychologist. The first thing they did was try to get me into therapy. But I got married and I had no idea. I knew there was something that I had. I knew there was some information I had, but how do I get it out? I didn't know. And so I said to my wife, Faye, at the time, I said, Faye, I have all this stuff that can help people get a better understanding of their pets, which would benefit not only the people, but the pets. How do I get that out there? On Long Island.
That's such an interesting idea. I mean, when I was growing up, there was no such thing as animal psychology. I mean, animals just had their own way, and you just kind of dealt with it.
Richard, when you were growing up, there was probably not much in the way of people psychology. I know there wasn't much when I was growing up.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, our attitude in our house was so out of sync with today's attitude to our animals. My dad grew up as a farmer, and so his attitude toward animals they were food. And when from a very young age, they owned a restaurant in Nebraska, and he would go out and be responsible for killing the chickens for that day's quota of food. And so in our house, he had such a different attitude.
But it's not that way anymore.
It's not that way
in our
anymore.
house now, cats are king, right? And probably too much. So I bet Warren could give me some tips for calming these little tyrants down.
After I have that discussion with your cats, I'll tell you exactly what to do. It's the way to go. But here's what happened. As I said to my parents, I said to my wife, listen, I got to make a living. So I started working at a dry cleaner, and people would come in with dog hair and cat hair on their clothes, the same people every week. And we'd start relationships, and I'd help them out a little here. But I said to Denise, to my wife, I said, there's something called a penny saver. I think you have them all over the country, like little newspapers that go to all the towns, penny savers.
Yeah.
And there's an affluent Jewish area on Long Island called the 5 Towns. So I took out an ad in the newspaper that said, we'll teach your dog Yiddish for $15. Now that may sound funny to you, but people call. That's the funny part. And that's what I did. For $15, I would go to your home, and I don't care if you had Cujo. For $15, Warren would come there and solve any behavior problems you had. And that's how it started. And then reputation started building and building and building and building. And here I am 40 years later.
So that's really great. I mean, it must require a huge depth of experience to deal with all the different animal types and all the different animal psychologies. Can you give us just some examples of sort of how you pick up on the behaviors and then how you treat them?
It's often spending more time with the guardians than the animal itself. For example, the typical American family. The husband's watching football on Monday night, tells the dog to hop on the couch with him. The wife comes in and says, get the dog off the couch. The dog calls me and says, isn't that the definition of neurosis? So those are the lack of consistency within is part of it. But so many behavioralists, years ago, we talked about latchkey pets. Both mother and father are working. When I was growing up, mom was home all day. So dogs have to deal with a lot more things like separation anxiety, first pet psychology. You have cats, a bunch of them. I get calls all the time. We have 2 cats in the household. We're introducing a 3rd cat. What do we need to do to make sure they get along? Or we're introducing a new dog. What do we need to do? And I explain to people, look at it from your point of view. I had a woman call me on the show last week that was bothered by the fact that her dog, for example, wasn't reacting the right way. And she wanted to bring another dog into the household. And she didn't understand why they wouldn't get along. And so, well, how would you feel if another woman moved into the house and went right to your makeup? How would you feel about that? You're bringing another dog into the household. He's going to go to the dog's bowl. He's going to take over all that area. So what I would do is I would introduce dogs on neutral territory. No need to be territorial. No need to be protective. And little by little, I had as many as 30 dogs of my own at one time. All rescue dogs, of course. So it's looking at the family. And so what I do is, animal psychology, animal trainer behavior, it's really like pet social work.
So I got to ask you a question though. So we have this little write-up on you here, so I don't lie, but I have to tell people I don't have this all memorized, but you were on Regis and Kathy Lee, NBC, Today Show is contributing pet and animal editors, private celebrity clients. But the one that I see here that I don't know how you would work this relationship is official trainer to the New York mob.
Yeah, that was, it was interesting. I had taken the ads in a penny saver. Believe it or not, that penny saver ad created my whole career. I got to David Letterman, to all those TV shows, all through that one ad. So what happened was, when I was doing those TV shows, it was my way of talking to the masses at one time, because the advice I was giving was I was so demonized by the industry, because everyone was, correct this problem, you got to correct that problem, you got to stop the dog from doing this. They were just totally micromanaging the dog. For example, someone calls me on the show and says, listen, I can't stand it. I take my dog to the dog park and he sniffs the butts of other dogs. And I explained to him, that's the internet. That's Google for your dog. That is everything your dog needs to know is right there. That dog smell is so much more important. So I think really what I do is I've taken something that no one else ever did. And now the hardest thing to find in America right now is someone who doesn't give you dog advice or cat advice.
But an important part of what you're doing, though, is you're teaching the pet owners to accept the animal's behavior instead of trying to change it, at least to some degree. And that just probably reduces the tension and the problems between pets and their pet parents.
Well, it's give and take. In other words, you can't expect your dog or your cat to respond 100% of the time unless you do. I like an 85% response. I'm happy with that. So what happens is, again, the people constantly tell me, don't do this, don't do that, don't jump up, don't sit here, don't do this, don't go out the door, don't pull, don't be here, don't poop here. It actually creates a neurotic or psychotic dog. It's created by the family. So it's what I try to do is explain to the family, look at it from your dog's point of view. How would you feel if everyone in the house told you what to do and you were the only one receiving? Of course you're going to rebel. So that's why I deal with a lot of dogs and many, many cats that all of a sudden, this ain't working, folks. I've had it. I'm going to pee over there instead of my litter box. I get that all the time. Or I'm going to jump on the couch, or I'm going to scratch the door. I'm going to keep you up. So I try not to focus on correcting the problem versus trying to figure out why the problem was created in the first place.
So I have a question, cat specific question. Why do cats guard the door? Like, I'll leave the door open a little so the 3 cats can go in and out, and one of them will just sit there in the doorway.
A cat's sense of smell is very, very strong. So they know, for example, if there's a stray cat outside, if there's a possum outside, or anything that they perceive as territorial or something invading them, they're going to stay where that entranceway is. So it's very, very common for a cat to stay by an open window or an open door. In their mind, they're protecting themselves from anything else coming in.
That's amazing. So just we're going to be very open and transparent about our pet issues here. And I just want to say from the outset that there's no neurotic behavior in our house. Maybe in other houses, but not in our house.
There are also no rules for the cats at all.
And there's no rules for the cats.
Although they do use their litter box.
But that said, we have a cat, an older cat, who starts meowing at
no, she's caterwauling.
Caterwauling. Can you reproduce a caterwauling sound for our audience? I
don't think they want me to.
I don't think but it's not meowing. It's like
yelling. She's yelling.
Yeah. I
as
thought
loud
I did
as
a
she
pretty good
can.
job.
Yeah.
And so if that's and so she starts it at 5 a.m. when I wake up, and she wakes up the whole household. And she will just go on these long rampages, and I'll give her some attention. I'll pet her, but she's really loud, and she doesn't do this in the evening or during the day. It's just really in the morning.
She's almost 16 years old now.
Yeah.
Well, at 16, is it something that's been going on for a long time?
No, it's just
okay. Well, here's your problem. Chances are she's losing her hearing at 13 years old. It's very common for a dog or a cat as they get older to lose their hearing. So the world sounds entirely different to them. They don't sound as loud to themselves as they sound to you because they're not hearing themselves. So it sounds to me like it could be, the best way to resolve a situation like that is to, before you go to bed, I don't know how you feed your cat, before you go to bed, give the cat an extra meal at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Full belly means better sleep. That's number 1. Number 2, encourage her mind beforehand. And you're making the big mistake, Richard, because if you react to the cat, why should the cat stop? If I come home late, my mother yelled at me and then gave me a chocolate chip cookie, I'm going to stay out late. It's not convincing me not to. So by giving her any attention, positive or negative, because animals respond to both, by giving her any attention, you're actually saying, hey, get up. And also remember that cats are nocturnal. So at 5 o'clock in the morning is like maybe you're 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. So a little extra food at night, give her a hug and a kiss, have her for another 13 years, and put some earplugs in when you go to sleep.
Okay, well, we'll give it a shot, and
but check out that hearing.
We're running out of options, right? So it sounds like good advice. So thanks.
Yeah. So Carrie, did you have a question?
It is, so I have an older dog. She's 15. She's a rescue dog. She's been with us for quite some time. She's little. She's about 11 pounds. She's a Jack Russell mix, which we know, they're a little bit crazy.
It's Jack Russell Terrorist, not Jack Russell Terrier, Jack Russell Terrorist. That's what I think.
You know what? It's funny. We call her the mass murderer because in her younger days, we have a dog door. We live like sort of in the woods, and it's possum, it's mice, it's birds, it's squirrels, it's like, and they all end up in the house. Anyway, my question is, I've always heard like smaller dogs are the ones that are a little bit more aggressive, right? Like she's usually behind me, but she will go and attack pretty much anything, like a Rottweiler, a Great Dane, it doesn't matter. She seems to have no concept of how much smaller she is than those. I have heard that one of the reasons smaller dogs tend to be more aggressive is that people humanize them a little more, meaning like we treat them as if they're small children. When something comes up to them, we pick them up very quickly and we like cradle them as if they're a small child, or we perhaps even worse, put them in a purse and we call them a pocket pet. Is there any truth to any of that? Have we created these little monsters, or is that just naturally in their disposition?
Well, no, it's not naturally their disposition. In other words, they're not born little and say, all right, I'm going to turn into Cujo, and they're not born big and say, I'm going to be this. So it depends on the individual dog. I hate to see, and I don't want to sound like Archie Bunker, that big dogs are one way, little. My two dogs right now, the two of them weigh 15 pounds together, and they were rescued about 2 years ago. The problem is this. It's a bit of a Napoleon complex. If I lived in a world where everyone around me was 18 feet tall, you better believe I'm getting a lot of tattoos, okay, right off the bat, rolling up some cigarettes in and I'm going to act as tough as I possibly can. It's a matter of survival, even in the wild. The bigger animals, that's what the old story, the elephant's afraid of the mice. Yeah. So it's all how they act. So it's all how you treat them too. In other words, my dogs, they're small, but I don't treat them any different than I would treat my German Shepherds or my Rottweilers. I treat them all the same. They all get the same attention. They all get the same thing. They're all spoiled, which I enjoy spoiling my animals. People say, Warren, you must have the best trained animals in the world. No, I don't have the best trained. I don't care whether my animals do this. I don't, in my backyard, for example, a lot of dogs dig holes, especially terriers like Jack Russells. So people would say to me, what do you do? And I say, listen, dogs are going to dig holes. So if you go to my backyard right now, you will find 2 kiddie pools. They're filled with sand, they're filled with dirt. Yeah. When I first got them, I went in there, I hid their toys, I got down on all fours, and I started digging like this myself. My neighbors don't talk to me, by the way. And so once the dogs started seeing me do that, now the only place they dig in my backyard is in those kiddie pools. So I can have roses and rhododendrons and still have my backyard. So there's always ways, rather than correcting the dog, there's always ways of channeling. So if you have an aggressive dog and it's little, what you need to do is have more people exposed to the dog, but not standing up. Let them get down on all fours. Let them meet the dog on their levels.
She's awesome with people. Amazing with people. Like my little guys, they're all over her and she's completely docile. It's only animals. I'm talking about a dog that launched herself off of a boat one time to go swim to shore and attack like a 150-pound dog.
Have you had the dog since it was have you had it since it was a puppy?
Oh, she was a stray. She was actually abandoned. She was kicked out. We found her on the streets in the middle of winter.
So in the middle of winter, I don't know, where do you live? What state?
I found her in Utah. There was like 3 feet of snow on the ground. So we've had her, we're guessing she was about 1 year old when we got her. So not since she was teeny tiny, but we've had her, she's 15 now. We've had her for about 14 years.
So she's a little dog that was stray on the streets. How do you think she survived? If she didn't act tough with other dogs, she never would have survived.
Yeah.
So she had to be the first guard. She had to protect herself by being more aggressive or more assertive to other dogs.
Well,
because she was trying to survive.
Yeah, I want to hear about Kenya's dog issues if she has any. I know you have a dog.
I have a dog. He's a 10-year-old pit bull. We don't really have a lot of issues with him. He's had some health issues in the past, like I'd say 18 months since I've been home with him during COVID. But what I did have a question about is my sister studied veterinary medicine at Cornell. And what I was always fascinated about with pet professions or professionals is how do you diagnose people, like things that don't talk, right? So I was always just curious, like, what is a diagnosis and was the most complicated diagnosis you've had to make? Because, pets don't talk. We don't really get a lot of feedback from them.
It's just like having an infant. They don't talk either, but you have to be an incredible observer. For example, this is going to sound a little gross, but I'll give you an example. I go out in the backyard at least once a week and I check my dog's poop to see what it looks like, because that's indication if they're healthy or they're not healthy. I watch how much they eat all the time. I give them a great supplement, my own. And so all of these things really make a difference, but it's the observance of the dog that's really critical. Most people don't spend enough time watching their dog when the dog is perfect and the dog is healthy and there's no problem. So they don't know what it's like to have a dog without a behavior issue or without a medical issue. So when it crops up, they think it all of a sudden happened, or it might have been going on gradually and might have been able to be treated a little bit earlier. For example, I had a call last week from someone with an aggressive pit bull, and I love pit bulls, greatest dogs in the world. In fact, I trained the dog up there on time, if you can see him, that's the Buster Brown dog. I'm Buster Brown, I live in a shoe. This is my dog, Tig, I live there too. Well, that's the last Tig that was owned by the Buster Brown company that was trained by me that I brought back. But anyway, they called up and the dog was showing aggressive behavior, which was rare. So I sent them to a vet and I said, have the vet check the thyroid. They checked the thyroid. The thyroid had increased. Once the vet got the thyroid down, the aggressive behavior stopped entirely. So sometimes you have to be that good of an observer, especially to indicate if there's something bad going. And I admire vets. In fact, very often I'll speak to my own vet and say, I'm not going to my doctor, doc. You tell me what's wrong.
Well, we had Eric, the reptile guy, on this show. We've had him a couple times, and he loves snakes. He loves snakes like we love kittens and puppies. And he was talking about how his snake got depressed. And he could tell.
I guess if you spend a lot of time with your snake, you can figure that out.
They do get depressed. I get calls on the show about snakes, but if you think about it, a snake lives in a great area in the wild. They're brought into a home. They're put in a vivarium where they live in the same rocks, the same thing. Of course, they're going to get a little aggressive because they're not having any stimulation at that point. Even fish need stimulation. A guy calls from Texas and says, I have a great dog. I said, how much exercise is the dog getting? So I have 10 acres in Dallas. I said, that's great, but look at your dog right now. He's lying under an oak tree, getting no more exercise than a dog living in a studio apartment on 58th Street in New York City. So you have to really observe and get involved. If you get involved with your pet, they can teach us so much more than we can teach them.
Well, do you think it's weird that we talk to our pets?
No, in fact, most people, there was a study, I wish I had it with me. There was a study recently that suggested that more people consider their dog or their cat their soulmate than their significant other.
That's not surprising. But should you talk with it in baby talk, or should you talk to it like another adult?
I talk to my dog about politics, I talk to them about everything that's going on. And literally, they appreciate the fact, whether they understand everything I'm saying. Most people don't understand everything I'm saying. But if they do understand what I'm saying, if they don't, it's still, they appreciate the fact that I'm taking that time to get down on all fours. We read books together. I read books to my dogs. All right, they're comic books, okay? They're not hard. But I still read books because they love that attention. And as long as it's positive, you're going to get that result.
Yeah, I remember one time our cat was watching TV and our son got in the cat's face and the cat got really mad at him and hoofed at him and walked around. And
in my cat book, one of the quotes I said, in the beginning, God created man, but seeing him so feeble, he gave him the cat. And it's so true.
So do you treat every single kind of animal there is?
I've been exposed to every animal, but I would say the majority of animals I deal with, it's more like the pets, like the dogs and cats and the occasional bird question, the occasional snake or lizard question. I had a call this week about someone who was working with a couple of rescue doves. So yeah, it doesn't,
Rescue bugs?
Doves.
Oh, okay. I thought you said rescue bugs.
There's nothing wrong with bugs either. I had Madagascar hissing cockroaches as a kid. And let me tell any kids that might be watching this, or any adults, if you want people to stay out of your room, get reptiles, put them in your room, get rats and put them in your room. When I was growing up, my sister, my mother, no one would ever go into Warren's room, and I liked it that way.
So
good strategy.
Do you have private clients now that you might visit, or is it all over the phone, or is it just your radio show? What are you doing?
I don't see many private clients. Every once in a while, if it's a really matter of life and death, I'll do a private consultation, but it's mostly over the radio now and via the website. I'm hitting close to, I guess, 5 million people a month. So, it keeps me pretty busy. It really does.
Yeah, that's a lot of questions answered for sure. So unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this segment. Just so you know, you got more time than our normal guest does. But it's really been a pleasure to having you. Do you have one more question before we sign off?
No, I just want to give his website. It's thepetshow.com. And I'm assuming people can find your radio show from there.
Yeah, the podcast for the radio show, it's all there. Don't forget that TJ, thepetshow.com. And there's literally hundreds and hundreds of articles that I've written that will resolve a lot of people from the day they bring the dog into the house to the day the dog crosses that rainbow bridge. So check it out. It's a fun site, and everything there is free. I mean, other than the product, everything there is free.
And many thanks for your work. I mean, I think you're making the world a better place if there's better interactions between people and animals, and you're creating happier homes and happier lives. So thanks a ton for that. You are listening to Passage to Profit. We just had Warren Eckstein on, and if you missed part of that, you definitely want to check out our podcast. You can get it on all podcasting places, and we'll be back with more Passage to Profit right after this.